Strange things happening. I've been living in the same house for 10 years, and over that span of time occasionally weird things happen. However, recently things have gotten very strange. My first weird encounter in the house was when I was about 12. I had been a very shy, quirky kid who liked to be left alone, so I spent most of my time sleeping and listening to music in my room. This particular day my nap stretched on too long, and I slept through dinner. But because it was a nap, I woke up around 4 a.m. I woke up with a weird feeling, like a prickly, uncomfortable feeling. It's hard to explain. I sat up in bed and started to look around. But all of a sudden, I got shoved over and felt like I was being held down, and I couldn't move my arms. I felt something go between my legs, and when I cried out for it to stop, it went away. Nothing happened again for another year or so. When I was 13, I was home alone and the lights went out. I've always been the fearless type, so I got up and headed straight for the power box. The power box is located directly in front of my walk-in closet, connected to my hallway. As I went to flip some of the switches, I stopped before I reached the box and looked into my closet. Have you ever looked into a dark area and seen something move through it? Something blacker than all the darkness, that stands out and you can just feel it? That's exactly how I felt. I don't easily get scared, but for some reason all my instincts told me get out. So, I told my mom I was sleeping over at a friend's, locked up the house, and walked over to my friend's house and stayed the night with her. I'm 15 now, and some really strange things have started happening. I'll go to turn on a certain light in the house, and it won't turn on, or if it does turn on, it flickers. However, my mom could turn on the same light, and it would be completely normal. On top of that, my animals have been acting strangely around me. My dog has always hated me, biting at me, not listening to what I ask. But recently, she's been submissive around me, and not like she's finally wanting to open up to me. It's more like she's afraid of what I might do to her. I have never abused her or hit her in her life, so there's not a single reason for her to act like this. Mind you, she's a big dog, 75 pounds, and if she was standing on her back paws, she would be about 4 feet 5 inches. My cat, on the other hand, has started watching me from certain parts of the house. Just today, she went under my bed, and 5 minutes later, she flew out from under my bed, digging her claws in my arm, desperately trying to get out. When I finally scooped her up and was holding her, I noticed her fur was sticking up in all directions, and that she was shaking. I held her and asked her what the hell happened, and she made eye contact with me. As soon as she made eye contact with me, however, she violently jumped out of my arms and ran out of my room. I was sitting there so confused. I have also been getting pains in my lower back and hip area, and I stopped growing since middle school, seeing as I'm a girl, and I started my growth spurt earlier. The reason I'm writing this is because I have no idea what's going on. This just happened today, and has been occurring for the past month, so any comments or suggestions to help me feel less crazy will help.
The Demon. I'll start by saying this. I was never planning on telling anyone, but I feel like I might lose my shit if I don't share this. I've managed to keep it a secret for a long time, kept it buried deep within the recesses of my mind. Until now. I'm a 20-year-old female, but this happened around the time I was 17, so it's been 3 years or so. I'm a lesbian. I've never really had a problem with my sexuality. In fact, I had a girlfriend at the time, and would spend quite a great deal of time with her at her house. We had been together for about a year at the time, and had a dog that was ours. It was as if the dog was our child, and she protected us as we slept. One night after a particularly long day, I had arrived at her house and spent the night with her, watching scary movies as we snuggled together in bed. Around midnight we decided it was time to get ready for bed, so she went to the bathroom to brush her teeth and I proceeded to put my PJs on. Our dog Sadie normally slept at the end of the bed between both of our feet. That night, however, she was curled up into my back, as if wedging herself between me and something else. As soon as my girlfriend, we'll call her Amanda, got up, Sadie turned her head to the corner and proceeded to growl for prolonged periods of time. I kept telling her to knock it off and just continued getting ready to go to sleep, brushing it off. When Amanda entered the room again, the dog finally returned to her sleeping position and we settled in for the night. I remember waking up, but not being able to move or speak. I felt like someone was sitting on my vocal cords, causing a nauseating amount of pressure on my neck. I could see that Amanda was asleep next to me, and I tried to wake her, but to no avail. I was scared shitless and afraid that I would suffocate to death in the bed next to her, without her even knowing. After what felt like an hour, I was finally able to move, and I shook Amanda to wake her, tears threatening to cascade down my cheeks. She had tears in her eyes, and I asked her what was wrong. What she said will haunt me for the rest of my life. The demon, he told me that I wasn't allowed to be happy. He said he would kill everything I loved, she told me. To this day I often think about the person she's with now, if they'll be safe. But one thing I know for sure, I'll never forget the night a demon tried to kill me.
Not that scary, but this was a few months ago. My brother had just passed away due to untreated cancer in his brain. He and his wife never got along, and she was partially responsible for his death. Anyway, about a month after, my mom was talking to my aunt on the phone, and then the subject came around to his wife. They were talking pretty loudly, so that is how I knew. As they were talking, what sounded like a small bomb exploded from our hallway. We had a shelf there that carried all sorts of glassware and decorations. It fell down and literally everything shattered. We cleaned it up with no problems, but it was so weird because that was one of the most sturdy shelves in the house. Now, a week or two later, my dad and I were watching a Cubs game. He is a Sox fan. As we were watching, we heard another crashing sound in our bathroom off the same hall. Another shelf fell down, and everything on it shattered, except for a small cup to hold candles. I think he is trying to tell us something.
She'd only kiss me in the woods, so I bought hiking boots. Long walks are how I relieved stress. I work in printing, so my job keeps me challenged. Not that I don't like challenges. She stood in the middle of my path staring at my eyes. I didn't want to make prolonged eye contact, so I did flinch. That made her laugh. She insisted I let her walk with me, so I did. Every day she was waiting after that. We would walk through the field and then the lower trails and then the woods. Whenever we got to the woods, she would kiss me. The first time she just blew a kiss and then left me. Her kisses found my cheek and then my lips. Then her kisses got increasingly more passionate. I somehow got the wrong idea about all this, although I am not sure how. One day I simply tried to kiss her first and she shied away. She smiled like I was crazy for that, but then she kissed me anyway. Weird. Every time she kissed me she would leave. I tried following after, naturally, but she would vanish. So I resolved to get my kiss early. I asked her, I don't want to go all the way. Can we stop here, while we were on the lower trails? She just shrugged and walked on, leaving me there. I didn't see her again after that. She had herself a new friend. More creeped out and curious than anything, I followed them and watched. As she reached the woods, he stood in a trance. She extended some kind of root from her mouth into his, drinking something out of him. When she was done, I saw her true face, horrible and bark-like. Her hair was filled with leaves, and her legs were those of a fawn. She nimbly vanished back into the forest, leaving her latest victim. I left him there as he looked on after her, touching his cheek from her kiss. Terror gripped me, unable to comprehend what I had just seen. Then I realized the root had gone inside me too, and I was unaware of what she had done. Somehow she could cloud the mind of her victim. As the other guy walked away, I looked back at the woods. 2 big brown eyes shone there in the everlasting shade. I could hear her laughter, and I realized that it was sincere. I knew somehow, while staring back at her real eyes, that that little patch of trees had stood there always, and it was her home, surrounded now by apartments. Still trembling in the residue of a nightmare, I ventured home. Maybe I will take up yoga to relieve stress.
My paranormal experience. I am a female, and I was 16 at the time of this story. It was summer, so school was out already. My parents were hardly ever home since work kept them away. My little sister was staying with our grandma. I had decided that night that I didn't want to be alone, so I called a couple of friends to come over. While I was waiting for them to get there, I had gone up to my room. As I walked in, I got a really bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and felt as if I was being watched. Now mind you, I was completely alone in my house, upstairs on the 2nd floor. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. I walked into my own bathroom to find all my hair products and jewelry on the floor, and the window wide open. That's when I started to panic. My first thought was that there was an intruder, and I ran to get to my dad's rifle in his closet. I kept it by me while I hid in the living room behind our couch. After a half hour passed, I started to tell myself that I forgot to close my window, and the wind knocked all my stuff off my counter. My door was knocked on, and a wave of relief washed over me. I ran to my door and opened it, only to find no one there. I slammed the door shut and started to panic again. Was some jerks messing with me, or was it something else? I didn't want to find out, and at that time I was thinking, where in the hell were my friends? Just when I took my phone out, I heard a faint laugh coming from my room. I sat and listened to it for a moment. It sounded like a little girl's laughter. Of course, that just freaked me the fuck out more. In the movies I've watched, that usually means get out of there and fast. But the laughing abruptly stopped. I was so scared I really didn't know what to do. Just when I thought it was over, a loud bang came from the kitchen. All the pans had fallen off the pot hanger. I was too scared, I couldn't move. Then I heard the little girl's voice again, though this time it was right behind me, and she whispered, "Help me." I turned so fast I could have broken my neck, and surely there was a little girl with a blood-soaked white dress. I can't tell you how fast I booked it out of there, never looking back. I stayed outside until my friends got there. I ended up going to my friend Shala's house. I moved out and never went back to that house again.
The Scream. Okay, this story still creeps me out, but I am happy to share it with you. I like to go for walks in the dark. I am not sure if this is strange or if everybody does it, but it just makes everything really creepy. Now for some information. I live in a well-civilized area with a lot of friends who live extremely close to me. Around 2 kilometers from my house is a heavily wooded area, and I like to follow a 4-wheel drive track when I go for my walks. Okay, time for the story. It was around 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and I was going for a walk down the 4-wheel drive track when I hear a very light scream in the distance. I assumed it was just some kids playing, so I kept walking, until I heard it again. At this point I knew someone was in trouble. I ran for my life hoping that I could help this person. I ran for about 100 meters when I came to the end of the track and looked around. One of the first things I saw was a girl about 19 years old being held by a 40-year-old looking man. When the man saw me, he dropped the girl and booked it around the corner. I sprinted over to the woman who was busy crying and obviously shaken up. Anyway, to cut to the chase, we ended up calling the police, and they came and took my statement and brought the girl home. I am glad that I still go for my walks. If I didn't, the girl would probably not be here today.
My walk down the driveway. So this is my first time posting, mainly because I haven't had an experience worth writing about until today. To begin, I live in a small town in Tennessee, and I live far back in the woods, on top of a mountain. I have some neighbors, but not walking distance away. Across my driveway is a road that leads to a TVA that is usually pretty busy this time of year, but with the whole coronavirus business, no one has really been around. Anyway, around 2 weeks or so ago, I noticed a car on that road, pulled off to the side of the road, abandoned. I didn't really think anything of it at first. I just thought it was a pretty weird spot for someone to leave their car, but other than that, I didn't think twice about it. Today, however, was different. I was on my usual morning walk down my driveway, which is about half a mile long, and I normally don't walk all the way down, because I don't want to get too close to the road and run into any creeps. I should note that I am a 20-year-old female, only 5'7", and around 120 pounds, and I have asthma. Today I decided I would walk all the way to the mailbox and grab the mail, for a little extra time outside, since I have been cooped up inside for a week or so. I wish I hadn't. It was a pretty normal walk at first. I was jogging most of the way, and when I stopped to catch my breath and continue walking the rest of the way, I noticed the car still sitting across from my driveway, and I also noticed something moving next to it. I stopped to try to see what it was, but I couldn't see very well, since I was still pretty far away and could only look through openings in the trees. So I continued down, and when I got to my mailbox, I noticed a man just standing next to the car. I figured it was the owner of the car and didn't think much of it until I noticed he wasn't doing anything, just staring right at me. I froze for a second and did a small wave with my fingers and forced a fake smile out in hopes he would wave back and continue whatever he was doing, but he just stared. At this point I was really freaked out, and as soon as I turned my back to him, I heard the sound of feet stepping on leaves behind me, so I started to run back up my driveway. As I was running, I could hear shuffling in the bushes behind me, and what sounded like footsteps just a few feet behind me. I didn't know what to do other than run. I had my phone on me, sure, but no one would be able to make it to me in time. But I knew my dogs and my boyfriend were just up the driveway in my house, so if I could just outrun this guy, I would be safe. I continued to hear the footsteps until about halfway up my driveway, and then they just stopped. I stopped behind a tree to catch my breath and looked through a clearing in the trees to see the man had turned around, tiptoeing back to the car. I am still pretty freaked out by the whole thing, and since this just happened today, I have not seen the man again. I plan to do my usual walk still tomorrow, but will bring my boyfriend with me this time. Hopefully this was just a misunderstanding, although I don't think it was.
I was stalked in a JCPenney. So this is my stalker story. I have to begin this before the day I was stalked. I was sleeping on my parents' couch when I had a really strange dream. The dream consisted of a few strange things. I was dreaming that I was sleeping on the same couch I was actually asleep on when I woke up in the dream to the slam of a car door outside. Thinking my parents came home late at night, I looked outside. I saw one of the strangest, most demonic creatures hobbling across my front yard. I felt really uncomfortable, so I rushed down my hallway to get a phone and my brother's gun. The next thing I heard was a huge thud on the front door. I started loading the gun and looked out the peephole. All I saw was fur reflecting in the light. It was the creature trying to break down the door and kill me. I couldn't remember where, but I read 3 words that still scare me to this day. I'm watching you. I then woke up for real with my heart racing. I then heard a car door shut and I looked outside. It was just my mom. I told her about the dream and she then told me she had to go to J.C. Penney. I decided to go with her just because of how scared I was. I then went shopping with my mom and I decided to look in the men's department. As I was looking at some different ties and shirts, I noticed a man watching me. He then quickly looked away while picking up a random item within his reach. I didn't think much of it, but decided to look back in a few minutes. As I looked back, I noticed that he looked away from me really quickly like before. I had to go to the bathroom, but I felt a little uncomfortable. I decided to suck it up and go, just thinking I was being paranoid. I had gone in the bathroom and did my business. The man then walked in and walked up to a urinal. I got a bad feeling in my gut, then looked back at him while washing my hands. He was watching me, then he noticed I was looking at him. He smiled at me like I was his next meal or something. I started to walk out of the bathroom and he quickly zipped up and started after me. I ran to the end of the aisle and just started looking at other things. I then see the man start to look at some things near me. I walked over a couple of aisles. The whole time, the man wasn't far behind. The man seemed to be in his late 60s or early 70s and I was around 9 or 10. I had heard different stories of people kidnapping kids and it freaked me out. But after being followed, I ran out of the store and hid in a nearby store watching the door. After a while I decided to find my mom. I was watching everywhere around myself and finally found her in the J.C. Penney. I freaked her out when I found her. I then remembered the words I read somewhere in the dream of that morning. I'm watching you. After that I've never seen that guy again, but sometimes I'm reminded of him and I think back to that time and feel strange. I'm 20 now, but the memory of that day just scares me sometimes. Was it somehow related to my dream? Maybe. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's my story, and the lesson is this. Please watch your surroundings at all times. You never know what people are thinking or what they're capable of doing.